Mother's Boys is the 1994 thriller starring Jamie Lee Curtis as Jude Madigan, and we also have Peter Gallagher as her soon-to-be ex-husband, Robert Madigan, and the intruding Joanne Whalley-Kilmer, who was formerly, or at the time still was, Val Kilmer's wife. So basically, Jude, who is Jamie Lee Curtis's character, runs out on her family for the first time when her infant son, Cass, is just a few months old. She returns 3 months later. Luckily, her husband, Robert, was willing to let her come home. So obviously, he loved the lady. He was willing to get things to work out. So we fast forward a couple of years. They now have 3 kids, and she has now been missing for 3 years. This is the second time she's been missing. It obviously seems to me that everything works in threes with this woman. First time she leaves, she's gone 3 months. Then she waits until she has 3 children. She's gone for 3 years. So basically, the reason why Jude decides to come home is because her husband, Robert, has finally filed for divorce. He's obviously found someone else who catches his fancy, and he'd rather spend his time with that woman. So Callie, who is the new love interest, also happens to be the assistant principal at the children's school, which does play somewhat of an important factor later in the story. Jude obviously returns, tries to recuperate her family. Obviously her husband wants nothing to do with her, understandably. She basically stops at nothing to try to get her family back. She seduces her husband. She tries turning her children against this intruding woman. Eventually, just as a way of trying to scare off Callie, Jude does visit the school. She wrecks the place, smashes a picture frame on her face, and cuts her forehead. She blames it on Callie in a vain attempt to try to get her fired, as well as have an excuse to press charges. And that's definitely upping the stakes in the bitchy things women do to each other. It definitely beats keying someone's car or slashing tires, so that's definitely taking it up a notch, so kudos. Jude convinces Cass to play somewhat of a courtroom game with Callie as a way of making it known that her presence is not wanted. What Cass does not realize is that Jude has used this as an opportunity as well to sneak out into the yard, cut the brake lines on the vehicle, and later as an attempt to try to run her off the road. Unfortunately, everything goes wrong when the youngest, being the little butt kisser that he is, runs off to get the tied up Callie a glass of water. He comes running back and trips, lands on the glass, and pierces his chest. So he's basically slowly bleeding to death. So eventually, the middle child does let Callie go. He refuses to give her the car keys, so she takes off running. Cass and the other son take off in the vehicle to try to catch her and bring her back. Unfortunately, they happen to have stepped into the trap that was laid out for Callie. They basically do chase off after her. They eventually later do realize, oh no, we can't stop the car. Roughly around this point, Jude sets the family dog loose, and in order to avoid hitting the animal, they swerve off the road and almost go off the side of the cliff. They're basically just caught by some of the trees growing off the side of the cliff. So the annoying Callie, still unable to take a hint and unable to mind her own business, runs over to try to help the children out. Unfortunately, she also winds up in a bind and is dangling from the vehicle. Jude, seizing this opportunity, also comes over to offer some assistance, encourages Cass to hand Callie over to her as she is stronger and can pull her back over. Of course, Jude being Jude, drops her. Callie manages to grab a hold of something else and save herself. In the friction that this does cause, Jude loses her balance, goes sailing over the side of the vehicle, and we never see or hear from her again. We eventually do cut to the hospital scene. Cass is obviously being comforted by his father. Callie butts in once again to console them both. And just from the ending scene, it always seemed to me that it was just implied that Cass was left mentally disturbed by all of these series of events brought on by his psychotic mother. He just has a very harsh, blank stare, and it definitely seems to imply that the family insanity has gone on. Earlier in the film, it is also implied that maybe the reason or partial reason for Jude's insanity, aside from trying to recuperate a family that obviously doesn't want her, has forgotten about her, we also do learn that as a child she had been molested by her father. Her mother, who was in the hospital at the time trying to tell her this information, winds up almost being suffocated as Jude begs her to just shut up and not speak ill of her father. And for some people, I suppose very deep buried information is difficult to deal with, but to some degree you have to respect the fact that maybe she doesn't go about it in the best way. But Jude is definitely determined to get her family back, and she obviously wants to be part of their lives, and in her own psychotic way, that is her way of showing that she still loves and cares for them. Unfortunately, as the saying goes, we never really do know what we had until it's gone. But all in all, it's maybe not one of Jamie Lee Curtis's best films. She definitely does pull off the psychotic role extremely well, but I think she does an excellent job, as well as Peter Gallagher. I think it was a very well cast film, and even if just for nostalgia factor alone, it's definitely worth picking up off the shelf and taking a look at. I do think it's a great film. I definitely think it could have been a lot better, but it is definitely an interesting material. That being said, I hope that either you have seen the film, you do enjoy it, or you would be willing to take a look at it and form your own opinions. But that is it for today, and I will talk to you later.